What happens when the stars who lived larger than life plan their own farewells? From simple graves that defy their lavish reputations to requests that blur the line between their famous roles and real identities. The burial wishes of Hollywood legends often tell us more about them than their decades in the limelight ever did. Elizabeth Taylor, the violet-eyed icon of Hollywood, crafted her exit as masterfully as any film role. Known for her opulent lifestyle spanning decades, Elizabeth's final request revealed her flair for the dramatic. She insisted on arriving fashionably late to her own funeral, literally. Her instructions were explicit. Start the service, then bring her casket in 15 minutes later. This wasn't mere whimsy, but a calculated finale, cementing her reputation as someone who defied convention until the very end. Her story doesn't end there. Elizabeth, married 8 times, found her final rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in California's Great Mausoleum, beneath a soaring marble Michelangelo angel, near her dear friend, Michael Jackson. Throughout her life, Taylor endured over 70 surgeries and was once pronounced dead for 5 minutes during a respiratory illness in 1961. Despite her glamorous image, she became a passionate AIDS activist when many celebrities shunned the cause, establishing the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation in 1991 following her friend Rock Hudson's death. Few know she secretly funded underground AIDS research and anonymously paid patients' bills when the disease was heavily stigmatized. "I kept seeing all these young men dying," she once confided, "and no one was doing anything about it." Even in death, Elizabeth orchestrated one final performance, leaving a legacy as multifaceted and brilliant as her beloved jewels. Joan Crawford, melodrama queen and one of Hollywood's most polarizing figures, left behind a burial request as stark as her most chilling performances. Despite her glamorous public image, Joan's final wishes exposed a fractured personal life. She requested cremation and burial in a modest crypt at Ferncliff Cemetery in New York, far from Hollywood's glitter. The true shock came in what she withheld. Joan explicitly excluded her eldest children, Christina and Christopher, from her will, leaving them nothing except a cutting line about reasons well known to them. This decision followed years of public speculation about family tension, later fueled by Christina's memoir, depicting Joan as tyrannical behind closed doors. Adding to the intrigue, Joan's ashes were placed alongside her final husband, Alfred Steele, in an understated, almost anonymous, burial site. What few realize is that Crawford's childhood was marked by extreme poverty and alleged abuse. Born Lucille Fay Lesueur, she scrubbed boarding school floors to pay for education and danced in chorus lines before breaking into Hollywood. These early hardships may explain her later obsession with cleanliness and order that her children experienced as tyranny. Despite controversial parenting, Crawford anonymously funded a children's hospital wing and paid medical care for numerous industry workers who had fallen on hard times, keeping these charitable acts secret, per her strict instructions to avoid publicity. For a woman who commanded attention throughout life, her final resting place remains eerily quiet, leaving more questions than answers about her true nature and relationships. Bela Lugosi, who immortalized Count Dracula on screen, made a burial request that blurred the boundary between his life and his iconic role. When he passed away mid-20th century, his family honored his wish to be buried in full Dracula costume, complete with the legendary black cape. This wasn't publicity-seeking, it was deeply personal. Bela had struggled to separate himself from the character that defined his career, ultimately choosing to embrace it completely. The story takes a poignant turn. Lugosi died nearly penniless, his career diminished by typecasting and personal struggles. His funeral was modest, attended by only a handful of close friends and family. Yet his burial in the Dracula costume transformed his grave into a pilgrimage site for horror enthusiasts. Few know that before becoming Hollywood horror's face, Lugosi was a respected Hungarian stage actor and activist who fought for actors' rights, even participating in the Hungarian Revolution of 1919. After fleeing political persecution, he arrived in America speaking no English and learned his first American roles phonetically. His thick accent, which became his trademark in horror films, was actually a deep insecurity. Despite his fame, Lugosi battled severe morphine addiction following a military injury and became one of the first Hollywood celebrities to publicly seek treatment when he voluntarily entered rehabilitation in 1955, hoping to inspire others. His final wish wasn't merely honoring his famous role. It symbolized how completely the character had become intertwined with his identity. His grave at Holy Cross Cemetery in California stands as testament to a man who became inseparable from the monster he portrayed. Wallace Reid embodied the golden boy of silent cinema, a matinee idol whose handsome face captivated early 20th century audiences. Behind that polished image lay a man whose life unraveled tragically. His death in the early 1920s stunned Hollywood, but his burial request was equally sobering. Reid, once the symbol of vitality and charm, was laid to rest in a simple grave, as if to erase the larger-than-life persona that had consumed him. The poignancy deepens knowing Reid's substance dependency, which began after a studio-prescribed treatment for an injury devastated his family. Dorothy, his loyal wife, who stood by him through his decline, became the guardian of his legacy after his passing. Reid was interred in an unadorned grave at Forest Lawn Memorial Park Cemetery, starkly contrasting the grand monument one might expect for a star of his magnitude. Before his tragic addiction, Reid was a Renaissance man, talented musician who played over 7 instruments, respected director, screenwriter, and race car enthusiast who performed many driving stunts himself. The studio-prescribed morphine leading to his addiction was administered after a horrific train accident during filming that severely injured his head. As Reid's condition worsened, his wife Dorothy declined lucrative film roles to care for him personally. After his death at just 31, instead of hiding in shame, as the studio suggested, Dorothy Davenport produced and directed Human Wreckage, a groundbreaking film about addiction, and devoted her remaining life to addiction awareness and treatment reform when addiction was viewed solely as a moral failing. His modest burial site quietly commemorates the man behind the myth, someone who, in his final moments, sought peace, far from Hollywood's glittering facade. Pola Negri, the enigmatic silent film star, infused her life with dramatic flair, both on and off screen. Her story swirled with romance, scandal, and reinvention. But her final burial wish solidified her reputation as one of Hollywood's most fascinating eccentrics. Negri, romantically linked to Rudolph Valentino, made an astonishing claim even to her closest friends. She possessed a small portion of Valentino's ashes, a keepsake from their passionate but brief relationship. The truth remains murky since Valentino, who died decades earlier, was never officially cremated, with no record of his ashes being distributed. Whether fabrication or genuine relic, it became integral to her mystique. Negri's burial site at Calvary Cemetery in California reflected her European heritage with ornate carvings and old-world elegance. Negri's theatrical nature was rooted in genuine hardship. Born in Poland as Barbara Apollonia Chałupek, she escaped grinding poverty and survived childhood tuberculosis that nearly ended her ballet career. When she arrived in Hollywood, she was already a European film star who had fled Poland during World War I. While Americans saw her as an exotic temptress, she was highly educated, spoke multiple languages, and pioneered as one of the first women to own her production company. After sound films threatened her career due to her accent, Negri reinvented herself in Europe, only to flee again when Hitler rose to power, refusing German studios' offers to make propaganda films. In her later years, rarely discussed by Hollywood historians, she lived modestly in San Antonio, Texas, becoming a beloved local figure known for her kindness to neighborhood children. Her grave became a shrine to her theatrical life, but the mystery of the alleged ashes remains unsolved. A final act of devotion, or one last performance from a woman who lived for the spotlight. Tula Bankhead, the magnetic actress, renowned for her husky voice and rebellious spirit, crafted a burial request as unconventional as her life. Tula, famous for both on-screen performances and off-screen antics, had one peculiar wish: to be buried with a bottle of bourbon, cigarettes, and her favorite book, the Bible. This curious combination perfectly captured her contradictory nature, a woman living unapologetically while maintaining a spiritual connection. Though her funeral in the early 1960s was somber, her burial instructions added her signature irreverence. There's more to her story. Tula's final resting place in St. Paul's Churchyard in Maryland lies far from Hollywood's bright lights. She chose this location for its proximity to her family roots, a surprising choice for someone who spent most of her life challenging tradition. What shaped Bankhead's famously uninhibited personality was a profound early tragedy. Her mother died shortly after giving birth to her, leaving her to be raised by a father frequently absent due to his congressional career. To manage crushing childhood loneliness, she developed the flamboyant persona that later defined her public image. Behind her rebellious facade, Bankhead remained politically active throughout life, ardently supporting civil rights when such positions risked Hollywood careers. She once canceled a performance at a segregated theater when they refused to allow black audience members in the orchestra section. Despite her wild reputation, Bankhead was remarkably generous, often housing struggling actors and writers and anonymously paying medical bills for theater workers. "Nobody can be exactly like me," she famously quipped. "Even I have trouble doing it." Even in death, Tula Bankhead blended humor, defiance, and subtle sentimentality, creating a legacy as unforgettable as the woman herself. Clark Gable, Hollywood's king and Gone with the Wind star, made a burial request revealing the deeply personal side behind the legend. Following his death in the early 60s, Gable was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in California, but the specific location speaks volumes. He chose interment next to his third wife, Carole Lombard, the great love of his life. Lombard died in the early 1940s, and Gable carried her loss for his remaining years. Despite remarrying twice afterward, he made it clear he wanted eternity by her side. What's particularly moving is that Gable's grave bears only a simple plaque, reflecting his desire for a modest, private resting place far removed from his larger-than-life Hollywood persona. Gable's devotion to Lombard stemmed from their unique bond. Unlike most Hollywood wives of that era, Lombard was Gable's equal, a successful actress who challenged him intellectually and emotionally. Her death in a plane crash, returning from a war bond rally, devastated him so thoroughly that he enlisted in the Army Air Forces at 41, despite being well above draft age. Friends reported he actively sought dangerous combat missions, seemingly unconcerned about his own survival. Military records show Gable flew 5 combat missions as a gunner when studio executives and military officials had agreed he would only participate in non-combat roles. The grief-stricken star carried Lombard's powder compact during every flight, a connection to the woman who had playfully called him the big frog to her little pond. After the war, the Private Gable rarely mentioned Lombard publicly, but close friends noted he kept their ranch home exactly as she had left it for years. His burial wish wasn't simply about love, but testified to enduring grief and devotion carried for decades. For a man larger than life on screen, his final resting place tells a story of quiet vulnerability and love transcending time. Errol Flynn, the swashbuckling star of The Adventures of Robin Hood, left a legacy as colorful as his legendary roles. Following his passing in the late 50s, Flynn was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in California. Though known for his flamboyant lifestyle and appreciation of beauty, Flynn's grave features just a simple plaque, surprisingly understated for someone who lived so boldly. His funeral gathered only a small circle of close friends and family, a quiet farewell for a man whose life had been anything but subdued. Flynn's roguish screen persona wasn't entirely acting. His adventurous pre-fame life included stints as a New Guinea gold prospector, tobacco plantation manager, and briefly as a slave trader. His notorious lifestyle and high-profile trials obscured a surprising intellectual side. Flynn voraciously read and collected rare books while writing thoughtfully about politics and social issues. In unpublished letters, Flynn revealed deep insecurities about being taken seriously as both actor and writer. Though portrayed as carefree by the press, Flynn suffered from recurring malaria, tuberculosis, and an undiagnosed heart condition, contributing to his early death at 50. His famous line, "I've had a hell of a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed every minute of it," concealed the physical pain endured during his final films, when he often needed assistance just to stand through scenes. Even in death, Flynn left behind a legacy of contradictions and lingering mystery, ensuring his name would remain as memorable as his classic one-liners. Jean Harlo, Hollywood's original blonde bombshell, created a legacy of glamour, tragedy, and a burial story that continues to captivate. When Harlo died in the late 1930s at just 26, the world mourned a brilliant star, extinguished too soon. Her burial request was elegantly symbolic: to be laid to rest in a white gown, surrounded by white flowers in a white marble crypt. This wasn't merely acknowledging her iconic platinum blonde image, but reflected her desire to be remembered as pure and untarnished despite the scandals and heartbreaks throughout her brief life. Harlo's final resting place in the Great Mausoleum at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in California is often called the West's Taj Mahal. Few know her crypt was paid for by lover William Powell, so devastated by her death that he ensured she received a burial befitting royalty. Harlo's tragic early death from kidney failure followed years of health problems hidden from the public. As a child, she suffered scarlet fever, likely damaging her kidneys, but her condition worsened from toxic chemicals used for her signature platinum blonde hair, a painful process involving ammonia, Clorox, and harsh soaps that burned her scalp. Despite her symbol status, Harlo remained remarkably down-to-earth, living with her mother throughout her career and known on sets for professionalism and lack of diva behavior. Contradicting her screen image, Harlo harbored deep insecurities about her acting abilities, taking private dramatic coaching throughout her career, while hoping to eventually tackle serious dramatic roles. When she died, MGM received thousands of letters from devastated fans, including many who admitted contemplating suicide upon hearing the news. Even in death, Jean Harlo's story combined beauty and mystery, a fitting conclusion for a woman who defined an era of Hollywood glamour. Mary Pickford, known as America's sweetheart and one of early Hollywood's most influential women, made a burial request reflecting her deep family connections and enduring legacy. Following her death in the late 1970s, Pickford was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in California. But her final resting place was extraordinary in its simplicity. She chose the Garden of Memory, a serene, secluded cemetery area, alongside her mother and siblings, a poignant reminder of family's importance despite her immense fame and success. Intriguingly, Pickford's crypt bears the inscription, "America's Sweetheart," a title she both embraced and resented throughout her life. Few realize that behind Pickford's innocent screen persona was one of Hollywood's shrewdest businesswomen. Born Gladys Marie Smith in Toronto, she supported her family from age 7 after her father died, becoming the primary breadwinner through stage work. By 1916, she had negotiated an unprecedented $10,000 weekly salary, plus half her film's profits, becoming history's first million-dollar actress. In 1919, she co-founded United Artists Studio with Charlie Chaplin, D.W. Griffith, and future husband Douglas Fairbanks, controlling her career when most actresses were treated as disposable. Pickford pioneered film preservation when few valued saving old movies, pleading, "I beg of you, don't let the heritage of film slip away." Despite her business acumen, Pickford's personal life featured profound depression, especially in later years when she became increasingly reclusive, rarely leaving Pickfair, her Beverly Hills estate. In her final decades, she would watch her old films alone in her darkened bedroom, a poignant contrast to her early life's vibrancy. Her burial site offers a quiet, understated tribute to a woman who shaped the film industry while often struggling with her public image's pressures. Mary Pickford's final wish wasn't about grandeur, but finding peace among loved ones, contrasting sharply with her larger-than-life screen persona. Rudolph Valentino, Hollywood's Latin lover, and one of cinema's first true symbols, left a burial story as dramatic as his films. When Valentino died suddenly in the mid-20s at just 31, the entertainment world plunged into mourning. Though his burial wishes weren't formally documented, close friends and family ensured his grave reflected his iconic status. Valentino was placed in a borrowed crypt at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, a temporary arrangement that has lasted nearly a century. The crypt, owned by friend and mentor June Mathis, became a shrine for adoring fans who still visit today. One of the most fascinating aspects of Valentino's burial is the legend of the Lady in Black, a mysterious woman who began visiting his grave annually on his death anniversary, leaving a single red rose. This tradition, continued by others, transformed his grave into a site of enduring devotion and intrigue. Behind the smoldering gaze that captivated millions was a shy, insecure man who collected poetry and philosophy books. Born Rodolfo Alfonso Raffaello, Pier Filibert Guglielmi di Valentina d'Antonghella in Italy, he arrived in America at 18, working as gardener, dishwasher, and taxi dancer before discovery. Despite his masculine screen image, American press ridiculed Valentino's European sensibilities. Wearing a bracelet given by his wife, using cologne, and having impeccable home decor taste, all prompted questions about his masculinity in 1920s America. This criticism wounded him deeply. Days before his unexpected death from a perforated ulcer, Valentino published an open letter asking, "What is it that people expect? What do they want me to do? I am terribly hurt by the whole thing." His funeral drew over 100,000 mourners who crowded the streets. The spectacle featured commercialism that would have horrified the private star. Zealous fans smashed windows for relics, and some funeral attendees sold souvenir pieces of the funeral room's carpet. Rudolph Valentino's burial wasn't just his life's end, but the beginning of a myth that continues fascinating the world today. Greta Garbo, the enigmatic star who famously valued solitude, carried her privacy desires into death. Following her passing in the early 1990s, Garbo's burial request reflected her lifelong aversion to publicity. She chose cremation and burial in her native Sweden, far from the Hollywood glamour that defined her career. Her ashes rest in a modest grave at Skogskyrkogården Cemetery in Stockholm, a World Heritage Site renowned for its tranquil beauty. Strikingly, Garbo purchased this burial plot in the 1950s, decades before her death. Not merely practical planning, but deeply symbolic, reconnecting with her roots after years of self-imposed exile in New York City. Contrary to popular belief, Garbo never actually said, "I want to be alone." Her exact words were, "I want to be let alone," a subtle but significant difference reflecting her complicated relationship with fame. Born Greta Lovisa Gustafsson to a poor Stockholm family, she left school at 13 after her father died, working as a soap factory lather girl and department store hat model before finding acting. Intensely private, Garbo gave only 14 interviews throughout her entire career. Her legendary reclusiveness partly stemmed from genuine social anxiety that made public appearances physically distressing, not mere celebrity caprice. After retiring at just 36, she lived another 49 years without making another film, despite numerous offers and sufficient funds to live comfortably, though not extravagantly. Her New York neighbors knew her as Miss G and fiercely protected her privacy. In private letters, Garbo admitted often regretting abandoning her career so young, writing to a friend, "Sometimes I wake up in the night and regret everything, that I exist and that I gave up." Even in death, Garbo remained mysterious. Her grave bears only a simple headstone with her name, starkly contrasting her larger-than-life screen persona. For someone who avoided public scrutiny throughout life, her final resting place offers a quiet, understated tribute to her enduring legacy as one of Hollywood's most elusive, fascinating stars. Mae West, the queen of double entendre and unapologetic confidence, created a burial request reflecting her larger-than-life personality. Following her death in the late 1980s, West was laid to rest in Cypress Hills Cemetery in Brooklyn, New York, her birthplace. Her final resting place in the family mausoleum speaks to her deep connection with her roots, despite decades of Hollywood stardom. Her crypt's inscription fascinates visitors. Mae West, I'm no angel, referencing one of her famous films and perfectly epitomizing a woman who defied societal norms at every opportunity. Another intriguing detail, West was buried in a gown she personally selected years before her death, a glamorous outfit reflecting her belief in always being camera-ready, even in the afterlife. West's boundary-pushing career began long before Hollywood. When women fought for basic voting rights, she wrote, produced, and starred in provocative Broadway plays that led to morality charges. Her 1926 play resulted in serving 8 days in prison, where she reportedly dined with the warden while wearing silk underwear beneath her prison uniform. Rather than discouraging her, West leveraged the obscenity trial publicity to advance her career. When finally arriving in Hollywood at 38, considered ancient for a female newcomer, she insisted on writing her dialogue and controlling her image, unprecedented for actresses then. What's remarkable about West's risque persona was her business savvy behind it. She owned her film's rights, invested shrewdly in real estate, and died with an estate worth approximately $50 million in today's dollars. Throughout life, West treasured a special collection of love letters from admirers, not celebrities or wealthy suitors, but ordinary soldiers who wrote during World War II, crediting her morale-boosting character for giving them hope during dark times. Mae West's burial represented her final performance, testifying to her enduring wit, charm, and nonconformity. For a woman who declared, "You only live once, but if you do it right, once is enough," her final resting place perfectly reflects a life lived entirely on her own terms. W.C. Fields, the legendary comedian known for razor-sharp wit and disdain for convention, left a burial request as eccentric as the man himself. Following his death in the late 1940s, Fields, who maintained a lifelong aversion to California, despite his Hollywood career, famously joked about wanting his epitaph to read, "On the whole, I'd rather be in Philadelphia," nodding to his hometown with characteristic dry humor. Fields was interred at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in California, though his grave marker lacks the epitaph he frequently quipped about. Instead, a simple plaque marks his resting place, surprisingly understated for someone who lived so boldly. Fascinatingly, Fields originally planned burial in Philadelphia, but his family ultimately decided against it, citing practical challenges. This decision has fueled decades of speculation, with some suggesting Fields' California burial created a final irony for a man who spent his life mocking the state. Even in death, Fields left behind a legacy of humor, contradiction, and mystery, ensuring his name would remain as unforgettable as his classic one-liners. Born William Claude Dukenfield to an impoverished Philadelphia family, Fields escaped home at 11 to flee his father's violence. He taught himself juggling using stolen fruit and survived on streets before finding vaudeville work. Despite his curmudgeonly screen persona, Fields anonymously supported numerous children's charities throughout life. His estrangement from his son, whom he saw only 5 times after divorcing, remained a private regret. Theta Bara, the silent film era's most enigmatic star, maintained her mystery in death as in life. As Hollywood's original vamp, she mesmerized audiences with seductive roles and an aura of mystique carefully crafted by studios. However, her final burial wishes revealed a surprising departure from her dramatic screen persona. Following her death in the mid-1950s, Bara was interred at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, beside her mother Eleonora, who died from pancreatic cancer in 1954. This choice reflected a desire for family connection, transcending her carefully constructed public image. What makes her burial particularly intriguing? Much of Bara's legacy has vanished, as most of her films were destroyed in a 1930s Fox Studios fire. Bara's exotic, otherworldly image was entirely fabricated by Fox Studios' publicity department. Born Theodosia Goodman to middle-class Jewish parents in Cincinnati, Ohio, she was rebranded with an exotic backstory, claiming birth in the shadow of the Sphinx to a French artist and Arabian princess. The studio claimed her name was an anagram for Arab death. In reality, she was a bookish Midwestern woman who lived with her parents throughout most of her career and enjoyed philosophy. The contrast between her vampish screen persona and actual personality was so stark that friends described her as the nicest, most home-loving woman you could hope to meet. After retiring from film in 1926, she shocked Hollywood by entering a happy, drama-free marriage lasting 33 years until her death. She spent retirement quietly attending classical music concerts and supporting young artists. Of her more than 40 films, only 2 complete features and a few fragments survive, making her one of cinema's most significant lost legacies. In personal papers discovered decades after her death, she expressed frustration at never being allowed to play comedic or sympathetic roles, writing, "I am not a vampire, I am a homebody and a gardener." This tragic loss of her work has only deepened the fascination surrounding her life and death. Even in her final moments, Theta Bara remained enigmatic, her burial wishes reflecting family connection far removed from Hollywood's artificial glamour. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our newest videos. Thanks for watching.